Good morning, this is Mark. It is about 15 minutes till 7 o'clock a.m. on the 27th of April, Monday, 2020. I had a dream. I thought I'd tell it. In the dream, there was a guy, a young man, and I was my age in the dream, and he was very white. He was just, it's like the light reflected off of him. He was human, but he was very white, and he had blonde hair, and I recognized him from any other place. He was somebody that I'd never met before. And he had a baby when he was very young. I think he wasn't married. And he was having trouble paying for the baby and paying for his girlfriend or his wife. I think it was his girlfriend. And we're sitting like watching some type of presentation. He was very young. I would say he was about 22 or something like that, or maybe something like that, about 22. And he knew I'd never had sex before. It's the same thing in my real life. I've never had sex before voluntarily. I don't ever remember having sex. You know, and you think if you did that, you would remember. But I was hypnotized and raped. And he was having trouble paying for his baby and his girlfriend. I think he might have been a taxi driver at one time. And he was eating stuff that I eat a lot of times, like ground beef, because I'm on disability. And we eat stuff like ground beef. Some steaks. I started having steaks not too long ago. You know, I remember it wasn't 10 years ago that I started eating steaks because I didn't think I could afford them. And I would eat out sometimes. Sometimes you just don't eat out and you eat a steak instead. And sirloin steaks I never had in my life until about a month ago. I had sirloin steaks about a month ago. And they were good. They were good. And that was the life he was living. He was poor. And I could identify. And you might be able to hear the bird outside. He asked, we were sitting like in an auditorium, and he was working his butt off. You know, and I felt better because I had an education, and I didn't have a kid. But he said, what's the greatest, what do you think the greatest pleasure is? What do you think the greatest pleasure is in the world? And I said, sex. And he said, what else? And I said, well, wine. Because I've been to Europe. I am poor, but I've had money sometimes. And I go to Europe a few times, about twice in my life, and I'm almost 50. And I'd really like to go to Europe for a long time and learn Portuguese better, because my Portuguese is good in some ways and not good in other ways. And I studied that in college. I studied Portuguese in college. And he said, but you've never had sex. And I said, yes. I said something like that. He said, you never had sex? I said, yes. And but he was working his butt off. He was working and working and working and working, you know, just to make ends meet. And I think that's bad. You know, and a lot of people will say, well, you know, and it makes sense to me. He said, wait till you're older to get married, have children. And I would say don't have sex until you're married. I look to Isaac's marriage as a valid marriage. He didn't have a marriage certificate. He just decided this is my wife, and that's all he did, because there was no reason to have a marriage certificate in a foreign land. And back then, I guess they didn't have marriage certificates. And even in the United States, we didn't have government marriage certificates until about 100 years ago. And I'm against the government being in our lives, saying, okay, you're divorced now, you get this money, you get into this contract with the marriage certificate, so I don't want to have a marriage certificate. But, or whatever the case would be, these are our children because you have a marriage certificate. Somebody said there was, a family and his children were put through some type of really invasive questioning in school, and the father said, "I don't want them to go through this." And I guess the mother said that too. And they said, "Well, they have to." He said, "Well, why?" He said, "Because of your marriage certificate and their birth certificates." So I don't want a marriage certificate or a birth certificate. We can make up our own documentation. I just don't want it to be government official, because that gives the government rights over our lives. I know that sounds crazy to a lot of people. It sounded crazy to me a few years ago. To go to the hospital to get your certificate. I don't want to do that. I'm running out of minutes. Wow, that reduced quickly. Now it's down to 5 minutes. And while I agree it's better to have some money when you get married, it's just good to get married. It's good to have children. When you're young, I'd rather have children when I was young than now. Although God knows what's best, and He's making what's best in my life. But there was a young man, when I was working, in my only desk job I've ever had, and it was a job where we were going over like things that were written out, like forms for buying CDs, and we look over the CDs and compare them with the what was typed up in in 3 minutes now in the form or in the computer. And he had a baby. He said, "He's my heart. He's my little heart." It's just good to have children. It's good to have children when you're young. I recommend having a wife, but it's good to have children when you're young. I'm about out of time. That was a dream. And I recommend waiting till you have sex. Then you don't have any problems, no STDs or sexually transmitted diseases or venereal diseases, whatever the difference is between the two. And I recommend having children when you're young, even if it's hard to afford. It's a pleasure. And God will take care of the needs. God will take care of the needs. Have children when you're young. It's better. The Bible says that. All right. The Bible says that it's best to have children when in your youth. They are like arrows in the hand of a mighty warrior. Something like that. Or arrows in the hand of a warrior. And have a lot of children, I would say. It's happier. All right, that's about all I have because I'm out of time. Okay.